We are dangerously close to human. Let's talk about Primate.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. Today, we're here to discuss Primate. But before we get into that, Daniel, do you want to let the people know what they should be switching on?
So this week I watched Steel, which is an Amazon series. There's 6 episodes of it, I think 40 minutes each or something like that. And the plot of it is essentially that a London investment firm gets robbed, and there are two back office workers who are basically at gunpoint forced to transfer 4 billion pounds out of pension accounts to the burglars' accounts essentially. After that, the story deals with the investigation into what happened, as well as the kind of the guilt and the experience that those two back office workers went through. The story develops from there. I've got several thoughts on that series. One of them is that I quite enjoyed watching it, and the reason I'm so recommending it is because I enjoyed watching it more than just about any other modern series in recent times, because there's just something about how they're acted, how they're written, how they're performed that just rubs me the wrong way. Almost all of them do this. And Steel kind of feels like an old school crime drama kind of thing. And it just flows really well. And I think the core aspect of this kind of this character study of these two people who kind of find themselves at the center of this massive heist and kind of what it does to them and how they deal with it and that sort of thing. The scenario itself, I think, is complete nonsense, and it ends on like a 15-minute speech by the villain that is just complete nonsense as well. But everything in between is actually kind of gripping and actually kind of entertaining. So I'm not just singing its praises, and I'm not just saying it's the greatest thing in a long time or anything like that, but it was a decent watch and a decent story, as long as you don't want like technical accuracy out of it. As long as you can look past that part and just look at the character stuff, I think it's a pretty solid story.
Cool. Well, I watched Wonder Man, Marvel's latest TV series, and I have to say I'm pleasantly surprised. I was highly concerned for this one, just with sort of kind of what was coming out about it. That they were dropping all 8 episodes immediately, which is what they don't typically do, and just the track record that, like, I think these Marvel TV shows have had in the past. But I would say Wonder Man is a breath of fresh air in terms of sort of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is completely different to anything it's done before, and just kind of like the basic concept of it is it kind of follows Wonder Man and the Mandarin. I can't remember what his name is in the thing, but like the fake Mandarin in Iron Man 3, Ben Kingsley's character. It just essentially follows this guy who just has this desire to want to be an actor, but has superpowers. But because of the world that he's in, I think they do like a really great episode 4 of sort of just kind of detailing and showing why he's trying to suppress his powers and why he's not wanting to let people know why he has powers. That's kind of a really good episode that kind of summarizes it. But I think the show in itself is carried heavily just by like the chemistry that Wonder Man and the Mandarin. I'm gonna call them next. I can't remember their names, but
I keep wanting to call him Tony Slattery, but I think that's a comedian from the 80s.
Tony Slattery almost sounds familiar. To be fair, I think there is some type of Tony something in there, but I don't think it is that. Honestly, like their chemistry in this is great. I think again, like Marvel love these short episodes where they do like 30-minute TV episodes or like sometimes shorter, and I feel like this is the first time where they've done a 30-minute runtime, and each episode's almost had like a beginning, middle, and end, and a concluded role within those 30 minutes. Or like the kind of like the behind the scenes stuff that you're kind of like seeing. It's almost like kind of like meta in a certain way in terms of an actor trying to like pursue their dreams and like kind of some of the going on behind the scene. I know like a lot of people likened it to things like The Studio, which I haven't seen yet, but just like almost like that peek behind the curtain as to sort of know what kind of goes on some of the sets, some of the conversations that might have, some of the trials and tribulations that some of these upcoming actors might face as well, from people that have like been in the industry and people that have watched things like The Studio. It seems like they got that right as well. Honestly, it was just like such a pleasant watch, and like I literally skipped through all of it like in a matter of like 3 days, just because I was just like eager to watch more of it. So yeah, definitely high praise for it. Hopefully it gets the viewership it deserves, and hopefully we kind of see more of Wonder Man, because yeah, he was great.
So I looked it up, and the character is Trevor Slattery. Tony
Nice.
Slattery is, like I remembered, a British comedian who was on the UK version of Whose Line Is It Anyway in the 80s. That's where I remember him from, and that is why. And the names are so similar. I keep mixing them up, but it's Trevor actually.
Yeah.
I've got a few observations about Wonder Man. I've not seen it, but first of all, it just came out and I'd not heard about it. It just seems to have come out with no fanfare at all, and it seems to have high reviews. Like reviews seem to be in the 80s, which I was surprised by because the last couple MCU shows did not get those kinds of ratings, and nobody seems to care. That doesn't even seem to be outrage surrounding it. People just ignored it.
I'd kind of seen it briefly, but it wasn't in your face marketing for this for sure. I think it's one of those ones where because it doesn't have like a significant impact on the MCU as a whole, and you can very much continue the MCU without needing to watch this. So it's more of a case of historically, like Marvel have like lost faith, like lost sort of the audience's faith, especially when it comes to the TV series. So that when something like this comes out, if there isn't anything obvious to like for people to scream about, because you kind of get like extremes online of like why everything is like woke or DEI or there's either like some complaining about like something going on in the show or like people absolutely love it or whatever. But like you said, this just kind of came and went without any controversy, but on the negative side as well, without any clamor for and to be fair, it wouldn't have worked as an episodic sort of like releasing it week by week because of the nature of the show. I don't think it has that same kind of like pull or that same type of like grab to sort of keep you coming back and keep like there isn't like a mystery in there like One Division for example to kind of keep you coming back on a week by week basis. But where it's dropped as a binge, you can kind of just like go from one episode to the next and just like kind of be satisfied with the watch if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a shame, but hopefully it finds more people, and especially with the reviews and especially with people liking it, maybe people just kind of check it out at some point.
Is there any superheroing going on in it, or are the powers more of a character thing where he wants to be an actor, but the powers get in the way?
The powers are more a character thing. I mean, there is kind of like one scene where he's like saving the day, and I think when you get to the end of it, he is kind of starting to embrace that. And actually, what's really brilliant about it is like he's kind of being scripted for a movie, and it's almost like breaking the fourth wall a little bit because like the movie that he's like being scripted for is telling the same story that he's actually experiencing in real life as well. And actually what I really like as well is that his character is like such a like history buff when it comes to like films. He can like recite certain things and like maybe he gets like prompted to do improv, but he does improv of stuff that he already knows, or like he'll like make notes on the script about like stuff that's happened elsewhere. And what I like is that his character kind of goes on a journey where eventually he kind of succeeds by finding himself as opposed to sort of know everything that he'd like learned before in like all these movies and trying to like be like everyone else. It's just kind of like a discovery of self in a kind of roundabout different way, which was really well done.
Yeah, I might actually check this one out. Like, it sounds like a real story,
Yes.
even though it seems to have very little to do with like superheroes or comics or anything like that. And I don't know the character from the comics, if he exists there. I have no idea. But it just sounds like they had an idea for a story and they're telling it, and
Yeah.
people can like it or not.
I would be curious to hear your thoughts actually. So yeah, definitely check it out.
I might take a look. All right, shall we move on to the main attraction? So, Primate is a horror movie which follows the story of Lucy, who, with a couple of friends, returns to her home in Hawaii to spend the summer with her father, who is a primatologist, who has adopted a chimpanzee who lives with them in the house, Ben. As they are kind of launching into their summer holidays, Ben gets bitten by a mongoose who infects him with rabies, and Ben then goes on a killing rampage as the rabies take him over. And the story then unfolds from there. So, what did we think of Primate?
I think it was fine. Is probably like the best that I can probably go with it. I think actually what made it good or like an enjoyable movie experience was actually the crowd in the cinema and their reaction to certain scenes or like certain deaths that happen in this. That was like kind of like the highlight of like everyone kind of like cringing or people like really being like sort of loud with their disgust with some of the things that happened there. But ultimately there isn't really much to take away from this movie. I don't think I cared too much about the primate and the killing and the stalking. It almost annoyed me a little bit that he kind of just like happens to be everywhere that they were. It was almost like he was just like, it was just like almost like psychic as to like where they were, especially like in this like kind of like big house and whatever. There was just like this like bit of a lull where they're like at a bit of a standoff and they tried to create like tense scenes, which didn't completely work for me. It didn't not work, but it didn't really get me on the edge of my seat as much. I think the bit that was like the most thrilling was probably the kills that happened in this. And the worst part is that there isn't really much kind of going on and with the story. And like I really wonder whether they kind of gutted a lot of the story just kind of based on how other movies have been received historically, because they're threatened to be like some type of like love story or like love triangle or like some type of like story there, and that didn't kind of lead anywhere at all, or it didn't kind of sort of sing all the way through. They made the father deaf as well in this. I don't know if that's a spoiler or not. It's just a detail of the character. They made the father deaf, and I thought it would have more of like an impact or a say. I mean, it has like a moment at the end of the movie, but it doesn't. Again, it doesn't kind of like really mean anything. And I think a lot of this is just like none of it really means anything. A lot of this was just kind of pointless. It's just a bit of dumb fun if you're in the mood for a bit of dumb fun. And I think I wasn't completely, but ultimately there isn't a takeaway from the movie. There isn't like a punchline. There isn't a point to the story. There isn't a moral to the story. There's like nothing to be had from it. It's going to be an interesting discussion. So yeah, that's my thoughts. I'll turn it across to Dan.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty much in agreement on this one. I really enjoyed watching it. Like, it's really tense, and I generally like the characters. And the characters I didn't like, you're not supposed to like because they're obnoxious teenagers. But like, the movie flows well for the most part. I think it looks okay. It's decently tense, and there's nothing to it. It's exactly what you think it is. Like, a monkey gets rabies and starts killing, and that's kind of it. So a lot of the time, I will like talk about promises. The promises that a story makes is a really important part of writing stories and marketing stories, and whether or not a story succeeds or not. Because every time you approach a story based on its title, based on its appearance, book covers, movie posters, trailers, the name, all of it, right? Like, that creates certain expectations, and then a lot of the time your enjoyment will come from were my expectations fulfilled or not. And I was promised a creature feature in which a monkey goes after teenagers, and that's exactly what I got. The only problem is it's the only thing I got. Like, there's literally, like you said, there's nothing else going on here, right? Theme wise, there's no allegory, there's no subtext, there's no broader point being made. It's literally, we introduce the characters in the monkey gets sick, monkey starts attacking, monkey dies at the end. And I'm like, technically that's a spoiler, but it's so obvious that I don't care. But at the same time, I didn't hate watching this. Like, this was like, I think I felt unsatisfied, but I wasn't disappointed. And I felt frustrated, but I had a good time. And that's a really strange experience. Like, that not many movies are just this straightforward and this simple and this to the point. And on paper, those are all things I like. And I'm not really holding that against the movie. I just wish there was at least, like, I kept looking for themes and I kept looking for symbolism. And there's a couple of references in this to other horror movies. Like, there's one point in which it references The Shining and Halloween within about 5 seconds. But that's the only time I felt like there was an intentionality behind it in terms of more going on than just the most literal sequence of events you were watching. So it's a strange one. I'm not upset about it. I don't have a problem with it, but it feels a little bit hollow. Let's talk about it.
So you were missing your generational trauma talk that all movies seem to be doing in the past couple of years.
Like, this is technically exactly what I want. Like, a simple, straightforward creature feature. It delivers some thrills. It delivers some likable characters. It delivers, like, I would say there are 2 good sequences in this. Like, if I would criticize this on a technical level, it's that it very rarely does anything interesting with the monkey. So when they realize that they're safe in the water, and so they have to kind of stick to the pool, and then have to figure out how to get certain things, how to get another phone, how to, get the raft because one of them is bleeding out, how to make a tourniquet with what they have, right? I think that is fine. That's a decently interesting sequence. Where they kind of have to distract Ben, like one distracts Ben and the other one tries to go for the phone and that goes wrong, and then somebody else pitches in and all of that, right? And then there's the other scene where the horny teenagers arrive and they think the girls are waiting for them. And so they go to the bedroom and the guy kind of gets comfortable. And then Ben pulls off his jawbone and just throws it around. And then his friend finds it a few minutes later because Ben kind of threw it out of the window and it landed kind of on the patio. That was okay. That was a neat sequence. But that was pretty much it. There was not much else. Like there wasn't even like a big showdown in the end where they kind of really like it's not even the Abigail thing, right? Where you are promised like Abigail promises a vampire ballerina and you get about 3 minutes of the vampire ballerina towards the end. And that was kind of my big criticism of that movie. But the monkey that never full goes ape is the thing, right? It never quite lets loose. It never wasn't this big set piece where they really go all out and where they spend half the budget on and that sort of thing, right? It kind of just plods along and it kind of unfolds the way you expect it to. And there's very little in terms of surprises or twists or anything like that. And I feel like it needed something like that.
Also, I think the main thing that people got out of it, or like the main thing that got reactions, were like you said, were when people were like dying, and like some of the kills were like quite gruesome, and you can kind of tell like that's what they focused on. Whereas like you're correct, they probably should have had a little bit more of him like fully going ape, or like kind of really using the environment. It didn't feel like that was a house where a primate lived in, for example. Like there wasn't like obstacle courses, or like the kind of like the ropes and the poles and stuff like that he'd kind of be using to like swing about the place and like get about the place. I think there was like a small amount of it, but I don't know, it just didn't feel like they were kind of maybe like utilizing that element of it that well. But
There was a rope ladder in the living room, but he never uses it.
because that was like actually one of my questions, was like when the girls made it into the house, but then it was made aware that like Ben was also in the house. I was a bit like, how did we get in? My thought was the doors unlocked, but then the other part of me was like, surely there's like a way for Ben to kind of maybe like get in and out of the house, just kind of like a little bit more freely as like a primate that lives in this property. I don't know. They probably could have showed some of that and like in how he was like stalking people. It wasn't all the way there.
I totally buy that he knows every corner of that house because he's lived there his entire life. But they never show it. Like they don't show how he kind of can like we see him climb like a few times. You're absolutely right. Like one thing that's needed was it should have established, like in the beginning in the sequence where everything is normal, we should establish that he can just take shortcuts that they can't take, and that he can move between the levels, and that they've like you said that there's like all sorts of toys like ladders or ropes or something around, and that is how he gets around. And this is a household that's had a chimpanzee in it for 10 years or whatever. Like how is this not like a bigger thing? And then another aspect in which the environment wasn't used was on the patio, there's a giant open fire. And they kind of move around it, but they never make use of it. They don't position the fire between themselves and Ben, for instance. Like that would be the first thing I do, right? If a chimpanzee is stalking me, I'm gonna go through the enormous fire. And I might even try to kind of make a torch or something. But it was there the entire movie. And they kept walking past it and I kept, struggling next to it. But they never used it. And that seemed a little bit strange that you're gonna put it there. And it doesn't even go out like once the killing starts, right? They might have had the fire while they were partying, and then it kind of fizzles out later on, and that's when you can roam freely or something. But that's also kind of missing. There was no real sense of environment, right?
Do you know what was so funny, and how I know that they didn't think about the environment, was when they were in the pool and they were screaming for help. And I say they didn't think about it. They literally did a kind of like a wide take, or a full take of like the house on a cliff overlooking the sea, and there's clearly no one else around here, but they were like screaming for help. I saw that and I just kind of found it funny. I was like, who the hell do you think is coming to help you in this particular situation that you're just like shouting for? Obviously, like it's probably like the default reaction that people will have is just kind of scream for help. But I just find it funny that you're in like the most remote house possible, and you're shouting over a cliff.
And they don't even say like the friend starts screaming for help, like the friend who's visiting from the mainland, and then Lucy says, "Don't bother. It's like 5 miles to the next house or something. We're completely on our own."
Did they say that?
That's of no. I'm just saying you could have put that in there. You could have had a line like this. Like you're absolutely right when it zooms out from the cliff. First of all, gorgeous house, I want to live there. Secondly, there's literally nobody else. Like you can't even see another light. You maybe off in the corner or something, in the corner of the screen. In horror movies, there's always this question of why don't they leave, right? And here that answers it. Number one, they're in a remote part of the island and they are trapped in the pool because that's their one safe place where Ben can't go. But then they don't even do that much with it either, right? When they first go into the pool and Ben kind of stalks around kind of the edge of the pool and he kind of swings from some lamps and he can pull on one of their hair and like is that Hannah, I think it is. Like he pulls on her hair at one point and then they deal with it and then Ben backs off because he's afraid of the water. I felt like they should have done something more with that. I'm not sure what, but like they have this one safe place out in the open and they can't go anywhere, but Ben then just leaves, but there's no other prey around. So what is he doing the entire time? So it's all a little bit contrived, right? And it's also missing some like the extra bit of creativity where I say, oh, that's kind of cool. Sorry, and it's not even just because he gets hungry, right? Like it could be that after a few hours he gets hungry, and then there's some bananas in the kitchen, and he gets those, and so that gives them kind of the like a break or something, right? But he kind of just leaves, and I'm not saying it's unrealistic, but it's more like it just happens, and then he's back, and then he leaves, and then he's back.
And then the part that I said I didn't like because it didn't feel animal like was kind of the way that he was like stalking them in the house. One, the fact that he just kept appearing everywhere. It was a bit like, this house is like, probably huge, and you kind of look at it from the cliff view. It's a big house. It's like a secluded house as well. So he just happened to be in the right area every single time. And granted, the type of movie, okay, I can kind of look past it. But the other part that I kind of like rolled my eyes at was when they were like hiding in the cupboard and they accidentally put the TV on and he comes in. And at first he's like acting like an animal. He's kind of like smashing things all over the place, but he sits and watches the TV, I think he does. And then he kind of like starts to look for them. And he does that thing where you look everywhere and then they then turn to the cupboard. And then he like starts to like slowly approach the cupboard and like slowly like pokes his head through and stuff like that. And I'm like, I understand what you're trying to do because it's like similar to when, like there's a killer in the room and, you're hiding in the cupboard and you've got to be quiet or whatever. But there's a difference between how a human would sort of handle that. Like if you have a killer versus how a chimp would be in that situation. So I know it was just like small stuff like that like bothered me. And I was a bit like, I wouldn't even say I was like halfway there. I'm like, I'm there, like I'm interested, but you're kind of doing things that kind of go against what the premise of the movie is meant to be.
He's still fairly smart and he's kind of calm and so on, right? Like you're right. Like if I imagine a chimpanzee going for somebody, and I think the thing about pulling the face off, like I don't remember whose face he pulls off. I think it's one of the boys, right? That's a thing chimpanzees do. But outside of that, he acted maybe smarter than he should have been, or at least like under the rabies, like maybe he's should have been more aggressive or something like that. Like especially when kind of this guy shows up in Lucy's bedroom, Ben seems really calm about it and really methodical, and he's like a slasher villain who stalks his prey or plays with his prey. Like he's not as aggressive as I thought he would be.
I agree. And again, from a movie perspective, I understand why you're doing the shots like that because you're kind of like building up the tension and you're kind of like building up to the kill and you don't want to get to it, you don't want to rush to it. But at the same time, you've made a movie called Primate with a chimpanzee that's got rabies. So you then have to like think about, okay, if you want to build tension, how do you do it in a way that makes sense as opposed to going for something that's generic and something that has been done in other movies, but in other movies it makes more sense than what it does for your movie.
I think we're being pretty negative about it. Like actually, like I liked a lot of the tension. I liked a lot of the suspense, especially when they're like one of the things I absolutely hate is just scared people walking through dark hallways. But here it made sense, right? And here it kind of worked because you knew Ben was somewhere and he was watching them, and it was only a matter of when he would pounce, right? So I actually do think a lot of this works about it. It's just missing that extra bit, and it's missing kind of the part that's sufficiently creative where it does something that's not entirely obvious. Speaking of parts that are missing, there's a few more things here where they kind of introduce ideas, but then don't really do anything with them or don't really realize them, right? We talked about how the father is deaf. And that doesn't have to mean a lot, but it could have, right? Because it kind of creates this connection with the sign language, right? Like that the sign language has kind of a dual purpose. It's how they communicate with Ben, but it's also how they communicate with each other. And I'm not entirely sure what I was looking for, but I felt like at some point it should have paid off in some way, especially when the father comes home. And actually, one of the things that worked quite well was whenever we are in his envelope, the movie just goes completely silent, and we see things behind him. Like I think at one point Ben watches him while he's kind of walking into the living room or something, and he doesn't hear him. That was decently effective, but I'm not entirely sure what I was looking for. But I was kind of looking for it to do something like how maybe the characters who know sign language can be more quiet and maybe can do a better job hiding, and the characters who don't, or like who are the friends who are visiting, they don't, and so they have to speak or have to make noise, and that gets them killed or something. I don't know, like maybe don't turn it into a superpower, but make it matter in some way. Or like this is a family that communicates in this way, right? And I kind of liked like their banter and all of that, right? And how they talk to each other and how they kind of talk behind each other people's backs. This whole thing about Lucy having a crush on, is it Erin? No, on Nick, right? Doesn't go anywhere. It's mentioned, but it doesn't pay off either.
Things like that are like things that I look at immediately because it's like, it's a creative decision to make the father deaf in the movie. Like as opposed to just kind of being a regular person, and that's when I'm like, okay, but why have you done it, and why is it in there? And like you said, Dan, I think for the most part, like there isn't really any rhyme or reason to it apart from the fact that he's unable to hear his phone because he can't hear the phone ring, so he like misses a few calls, and his daughters are being attacked by Ben while he's home, but he can't hear it. Like apart from that, there wasn't really anything to it, really. And yeah, and I agree. Like it could have meant a little bit more. It could have like had a little bit more impact on sort of how the characters navigate the situation or sort of navigate the threat. But yeah, it was just kind of a bit empty, unfortunately. And I don't know. It should have meant something.
There's another thing about like one potential source of conflict is that apparently the father is really hard up for cash, and he's really nervous about getting this book deal or whatever it is that he's pitching, right? And that is why he initially ignores the calls, because he has to make this work. So he's just published a book, and maybe he's selling the rights or something, right? But like it is said that at one point that he's really nervous about how this has to work out for him. He has to get this deal, and then he has to walk away from the deal in order to save his daughters, or because he's concerned for them because he's been getting messages from them. I don't remember exactly how it played out now, but he walks away from the meeting, right? Because he feels he's needed at home. That looks like conflict to me, and it looks like a dilemma to me. But why wasn't it really part of the story?
You would have to ask the writers about that one. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer.
All it would have taken would have been to kind of make clear what the stakes are. Maybe it means they lose the house now, but because like maybe they can't afford the mortgage anymore because he walked away from this deal, and Killer Monkey is not an excuse the publisher cares about, maybe, or something like that. And so he saves his family, or they survive together, but they will lose this amazing house and they will live a completely different life going forward. Because he walked away from their deal, but he walked away from it because the people he cared about were in danger. Put that in there. Have him be a little bit ambivalent about it. It's like, hey, it's probably fine. I can't really afford to walk away from this. But they make a big deal out of multiple times, right? Like it's in the beginning when he has this meeting when Lucy arrives. And then again when he gets the calls and then he walks away from the meeting, his agent is basically telling him, like, you're screwing this up. Never comes back, never has ramifications.
That's why I feel like when I was like just kind of giving my initial thoughts is that it almost feels like there was like actual story kind of just gutted from it, just because I can't believe that they would like put this together and not really have like some type of thesis or like some type of like actual talking point to the movie. What you're saying there seems like elements of what was maybe once in a previous script where there was probably like a little more on that, but maybe it was a case of no one really cares about it, or like it didn't like test well, or something along the lines where they like kind of got rid of it. It seems because I kind of refuse to believe that they created this movie and didn't really have something to say.
I kind of buy it because so many movies do it. So many movies just put stuff in and don't bother to connect to the rest of the movie. This is not the only time this has happened. I totally buy that they just kind of put this in because it felt like it raised the stakes, or it was drama, or I don't know what. And maybe you're right. Maybe at one point they intended for this to be a subplot and then cut it, because this feels very streamlined, right? This feels very much cut down to the basics. And it's possible that, I don't know, it like test audiences didn't like it or whatever. But then you keep these pieces in, and you don't do anything else, is kind of the thing. And then another one we kind of mentioned is Lucy being interested in Nick does not matter. Like, especially, here's the thing, like, since we're in rewriting mode, what if both Nick and Hannah are in danger and Lucy can only save one of them? And she has to choose between her friend and her crush, who is clearly not interested in her, but she's not quite over him. And she's conflicted because she's 17 and, she's like, she can't handle that kind of pressure. Whatever. Why not put something like that in there? Like, it doesn't have to be that. It can be anything, any number of other things. But, well, like, again, why introduce it and then don't pay it off and then don't do anything with it?
Unsure. Honestly, like that one was the one that like didn't make sense, especially like when he died so early in the movie. I was a bit like, oh, I fully expected, especially like him kind of being one of the only males in the movie, and with him having like the somewhat love triangle with that was that it might end up being like those three at the end, or like maybe like four with the sister included in at the end. But like you said, it just kind of doesn't go anywhere, and then he died, and I was a bit like, oh shit, okay, so what? So, and then I fully thought that there'd be like some type of conflict between the two of them as well, the friend and the daughter. There doesn't seem to be any conflict there, and then actually the friend does like a brave thing when they're trying to get the phone by like trying to distract Ben as well. So kind of like helps her in that situation, but then it's never really addressed, or it's never really kind of like spoken about. And actually, justice for the friend, because she's the only one that had like somewhat of a sensible idea in this about why don't they have a gun and why don't they shoot the chimpanzee. I know they've had the chimp for so long, but there should have been precautionary method available to them. Whether it's like I'm not advocating for like an actual gun, but like whether it was like some type of like
I
tranquilizer or
am.
like stun gun. I mean, I for sure would probably have like something there to kind of put down the chimp if it ever went rogue.
They keep him in a cage. They seem very security conscious, right? Like, this is a pure coincidence that he gets bitten by this mongoose, right? They even like ask another doctor to kind of take a look, and he then gets killed. One of the things I like about them, and like this is another hobby. Like, what's interesting about this movie is it kind of summons all of my movie pet peeves and kind of does them right. It makes promises and then fulfills them. That sort of thing. Like, a lot of the things I like complain about in movies, this movie actually does correctly. And then another thing it does correctly is that these are not idiots. They are not irresponsible. The entire family is really security and safety conscious. They know what they're doing. The children have been drilled on how to handle monkeys. When Hannah, I think it is the like the friend, is scared of the monkey, both Lucy and the father know how to handle it. They don't make fun of her. They're not angry with her. They handle Ben and then they put her at ease, right? Like, multiple times. I think I especially liked Lucy in this because of how mature she was and how protective of her friends and her little sister she was, and how responsible she was around Ben and all of that, right? Like, this is not a typical teen slasher character. This is actually a pretty likable, responsible, mature, grown-up character, which kind of reminds me of Alien. Because in Alien 2, they do everything right and they still almost all die, right? Because the alien is just that dangerous. And here, Ben is just that dangerous. And I think he's more threatening and more dangerous because Lucy and the father do everything right. They don't take unnecessary risks. They don't ignore the symptoms. They make sure Ben is taken care of and the friends feel safe and all of that, right? And it still goes off the rail. And because of that, it feels more satisfying and it feels more impactful, and Ben feels more threatening, and the stakes feel higher and the situation feels more dire. It does a lot of things right. It's kind of what I'm saying. But then we have things like, why do you see to the idea that there should be no rabies in Hawaii?
Especially at the fact that when Ben starts acting up, the one of the daughters' first thing is, "Oh, he probably has rabies or something like that, or does he have rabies?" So for the father to kind of be a little bit too blasé about the possibility of rabies, but the daughter to be like, so that for that to be that like the first guess, I was a bit like, unsure, but yeah.
I mean, the thing is, there's not supposed to be rabies, right? So they take the mongoose to the lab and they test it, and the vet calls back and basically says, look, clearly there's been a lab error because the sample tested positive for rabies, and there's no rabies in Hawaii. And so we are retesting and we'll get back to you, right? Like, totally reasonable, totally fair, right? It's just too late at that point, right?
So it wasn't the lab that said it. So the lab said it, and then the dad was like, "Can't be possible. There's no rabies." And then the lab were like, "Oh, we'll do a retest for you just to double check."
Right. Yeah. But it kind of like they both agree that this can't be the real result, right? And that's why you retest, because if you get an impossible result, chances are it's lab error. And then when it comes back the second time, that's when they call the police, or or the ambulance, right? So again, everybody basically, like, the only time somebody acts in an unprofessional or emotional manner in this is when the vet snaps at the dad for mansplaining rabies, right? Like, the dad says, but there's no rabies in Hawaii. And it says, yeah, well, thank you for your professional advice as a veterinarian, right? Which is totally unprofessional. Like, it's a totally fair point. But anyway, that's the only time anybody is unreasonable in this movie, pretty much. After that, they say, okay, we got to retest this. We got to get to the bottom of this. But it does not matter. Like, there's no point being made about how this was like an impossible risk, or they did everything. Like, the movie is not about how you can do everything right and you can still lose, right? That could have been the thesis of the movie, right?
You could even add, with the whole like conversation about like vaccines and stuff like that. And I know it's like or whatever, where like more people are like choosing to opt out of like certain vaccines for their kids and stuff like that or whatever. You could have done some type of commentary around that where like it's kind of linked to someone else deciding to do something different and like that then affecting you or something along the lines because like that kind of seems to be current, like one with COVID and two just with like all the different like conspiracies around like how like vaccines cause like certain things. It seemed like there was like an opportunity there to kind of do some type of link and tell some type of story around that.
I'm not sure if there's a rabies vaccine. I think there is, right?
Unsure. That's why I didn't tell you. Like I'm unsure if there's like a rabies vaccine, but I just know that there's like a conversation around like just like vaccines in general as a whole. And
Yeah.
I don't know if there is or isn't a rabies vaccine. I'm not kind of like an expert in that field, but like if there was, then there could have been like something around that.
There could have been, right? And like, another theme I'm kind of sensing in this is like the obvious theme in this kind of family, which is kind of a catch-all, lazy theme. But a more interesting one is responsibility, about how everybody is responsible, everybody does the right thing, and then this entire thing happens because of something impossible. I very much doubt that there's supposed to be a theme in this, or there's supposed to be some larger point being made. I think this is just the monkey slasher movie. But just as an idea, this idea of responsibility and taking safety seriously is absolutely in here. The people who survive are the ones who take this seriously, and the people who die are the reckless idiots.
Just to add to the theme of responsibility, because again, there was like a threat of some type of commentary about like the sister when she came back, and like the younger sister didn't want to speak to her initially because she was like, "Oh, you've been gone for so long," or whatever. And again, it kind of almost like ties back into responsibility because then like you think of it for the younger sister who has a deaf father that she has to kind of like live with as well as a chimpanzee. So like there's like extra responsibility on her while that older sister is off at university or wherever she was. Again, there could have been like some type of like through line with like the responsibility angle there, but it's kind of introduced and then dropped quite quickly that whole like sister or like the mini conflict between the sisters.
That also goes nowhere. First of all, it's a weird response. Like, how many siblings are upset that their older sister is at university? It's like one of those things that are just a fact of life. And then you're right, it evaporates very quickly. Like, it's not really a lingering, it's not a conflict that needs to be resolved. It's not a complication that causes problems later on, where, I don't know, like the younger sister does not listen to Lucy because she's still upset with her, and that's when she makes mistakes, and that's when she gets hurt or something, right? You could imagine them tying those ideas together in that way, and that doesn't happen either. So it's another thing that's kind of introduced and then doesn't go anywhere. And for a movie that's this empty and this obvious and this short, drop half of these and develop the other half, and you've got a perfectly solid 110-minute movie or something.
Also, it's funny you call it short. I don't know. It felt quite long to me, even though it's only an hour and 28 minutes, and kind of movie time is quite relative.
This is 89 minutes. This is probably the shortest movie in like 40 years or something.
I know, but like honestly, I actually like this is like a personal thing. It felt quite long, just because like I know you had a good time with it. I think I was like okay on it. Like it was kind of like fine, but I was a bit like it's like there wasn't really much happening outside of the killing, so I wasn't as invested. So it kind of just felt a little bit longer than what the movie was, to be honest.
I've been complaining like throughout the early 2020s. Movies just were way too long, and they're 3-hour monstrosities. And I think the worst one we've done was like Mission Impossible at 3.5 hours or some nonsense like that. And it's like, I think movies should be snappier. They should be to the point. They should be linear. Like movies don't have to be linear, but a lot of really good movies are just really focused on this one thing. This is another one of those things that it does exactly what I want movies to do, and then it's a little bit empty. But you could have added like 10 minutes, make this 98 minutes or something, or 100 minutes, and it explores this idea of responsibility and characters kind of having different takes on the idea of responsibility. It's clearly seated in there. It's clearly like all the groundwork is there, but then not much happens. Why even introduce that it's rabies? Why say multiple times that it can't possibly be rabies because there's no rabies in Hawaii? And then don't do anything with it. Just imply that it's rabies or something like it. And that it doesn't really matter. What matters is that Ben is now dangerous. And that's the only thing the story needs. Why add all these other lines?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure.
We kind of talked about how this is rewinding the clock in terms of filmmaking, right? Like how short it is, how linear it is, how to the point it is. It's also seems to be like rich people adventures are back. Like this is something that was out of fashion for at least a decade. It used to be like especially in the 2000s going into the early 2010s, where you would follow like I don't know, New York high society, or especially for a primatologist, this guy is really rich, right? Like this guy like has a really nice house in one of the nicer, like they don't live downtown in Hawaii, right? Like Hawaii is not just beaches and jungle. It's like there's actual cities there, right? They don't live like in an apartment in the city near the campus or something. This guy has published apparently enough books on primatology to afford them a really nice life, which then is then in conflict with this whole idea about how there's seemingly a lot at stake with the book deal, which he walks away from, which is never elaborated on. But by all symptoms, like this is a pretty wealthy family. It's just an observation, right? Like I always kind of liked kind of the glamorous high society setting, which is not the same thing as glamorizing the people, or like a lot of the times these people are really awful, like in a lot of stories. But like for a decade or so, it was not done very much, and it's kind of coming back, and just find that interesting.
You actually reminded me when you said that. Is I actually noticed that, and I was like, they're actually not portraying the rich people to be assholes in this. Like you said, like sometimes they kind of like paint the scene, but then they also paint some of the rich people to kind of be money hungry, power hungry, or like whatever the case might be, and they kind of give them like a negative portrayal. But actually, like you said, like the daughters are all quite likable characters. The father's like a caring father, and he like gives up his deal to go and like be with his daughter and like check out what's going on and sort of check out their like well-being.
Even the boys are not awful, right? They're kind of horny brats, but that's just because they're 17. They're not by themselves awful people. They are idiots when they're called for help, but no, honestly, that like call any 17-year-old, see how they respond. They're not going to take you seriously.
Oh, this actually just kind of reminds me of this. Now that we're saying this, one more egregious thing about the movie is, and they could have easily just changed this, is the fact that they were flying economy. Like now that you're saying how rich they were and like they have this like outrageous house, why the hell were they in economy with everyone else? Because for sure they would not be in there.
Yeah, but it's like a 2-hour flight from California.
Really?
Would you pay for business for a 2-hour flight?
If I was that rich, yes. Hands down. If I was that
Maybe.
rich, yes.
I don't know. I don't know. But it kind of comes down to how down to earth they are, right? They're not snobs. They're not completely out of touch. This is not like Death of a Unicorn, right? Where the rich people are just the cartoonishly worst people you've ever met. These are fairly normal people who just happen to have a bunch of money and live in this really nice house. But otherwise, they're normal people.
I didn't know that the flight time was actually that short. So it kind of makes sense. I thought it was like a longer flight across wherever.
I'm guessing like I've flown business class a few times in my life, and like one of them was like a 8-hour flight, and there I really appreciated it. But for like a 2-hour flight, you would not do this. I think most people wouldn't, unless you're so rich that you just don't care anymore. It's a bit like, why do trains have a first class? Like trains in London have a first class compartment who's paying double price for a 20-minute commute. You have to be quite rich to just not care at all anymore. But they don't seem to be like this, right? They just have this house, and who knows for how long they've had it, and who knows how much that actually makes. Because he doesn't make any money as a primatologist, so it has to come from the books. And maybe he sold a couple of books, and that's how he bought the house. And outside of that, they're not that cash rich. I don't know. Especially since it's not a plot point. It's, again, does not really matter, right? Like every time somebody walks into the house, they remark on how nice it is, and that's it. That's kind of the extent of it.
There isn't really kind of much else to it apart from, and I guess like the only like way it plays in is like what regular person is going to have a chimpanzee at home, and you kind of have to like be rich
Yeah.
to be able to own one, which is like yeah. But outside of that,
But they didn't buy Ben. He's a research project. They have him because the dad is a primatologist.
no, but it's more so like again, can you imagine just like living in an apartment building and having a chimpanzee living with you? Like you kind of have to have like a certain setting to be able to house one.
They have to have a house. Yeah, that's right. Although now I want to kind of see kind of a sequel to it or like a maybe prequel where they didn't have the house yet or something. I don't know. Like it's just a different kind of movie. But yeah, you're right. It would be a very different movie if this was set in an apartment building or something. And then while we're just talking about stuff that doesn't matter, like at the very end, there's this soundboard, right, that Ben has, and he communicates with the family by pressing the buttons, and then the voice says the name. And the first time the robotic voice says Lucy Bad, a little bit chilling. Like that was effective. And then it happens again at the very end where they think they've survived it, and then they hear the voice again, and it's a cop who accidentally pushed the button, and then the movie ends. That's literally the last frame of the movie where they look over and they see the cop holding it, or maybe the paramedic or somebody. But like it's an accident. It's a complete fake out. So in a movie that is kind of devoid of ideas and sets up a whole bunch of stuff and pays nothing off, it ends on a fake out. Like at that point, they're making fun of us, aren't they?
You could say that. You could say that. It kind of gave like a Scream type of vibe, that ending. Like you
Yeah.
like the killer's still out there somewhere, but we kind of saw Ben die in this, so it's like I don't know where they'll go with the sequel.
But in Scream, it's like the killer has come back 5 times. And then in the end, when they finally got him, there's a fake out. And that kind of goes into this idea of, but is he really gone? That's not been the deal with Ben, right? Like he gets injured and he disengages a few times, but I think there's one fake out in the end, right? If I remember correctly, in the final fight where he kind of twitches again, and then I forget how they kill him, but they kill him for good. They're not really doing the slasher thing where the killer keeps coming back. And even though there should be, like, again, they're doing something that I want out of movies. Like in a lot of slasher movies, especially like not so great ones from the 90s, the killer would keep coming back like 4 or 5 times, even if there should be reasonably dead. And it just gets more and more absurd. They don't do this here, right? Like I think it's pretty believable how much punishment Ben can take and what it takes to finally defeat him. So the fake out doesn't even have resonance to that idea. Another aspect of this is that this is getting around 80%, like high 70s from critics and from audiences. The reviews are really milquetoast. Like almost nobody has any major complaints. Everybody thinks it's fine. Nobody's amazed by it. Nobody's upset by it. And I think that's kind of interesting that this movie is so inoffensive that nobody is doing any posturing. Nobody is nitpicking anything. We might be the most negative I've seen on this, even though I kind of like this one. Like in 8 minutes when this hits Amazon Prime, I might watch it again. I might not pay very much attention to it. I might put it on because it's fine. It's inoffensive. It flows well. I like the characters. Like a bunch of the action is fine. There's nothing about it that breaks it. There's nothing annoying about it. It's fine. But that's it, right? So I don't think I've seen a movie this okay in a long time, which is weird.
Like it generally doesn't try to put any tricks in it at all.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I feel like the deaths in this are satisfying enough to kind of carry it for the most part. Like, seeing someone's face get peeled, seeing the impact of the boy drop from the pool all the way to the ground, seeing the jaw being ripped off, I think is probably one of the highlight kills of this. I think all great and all make you feel something at least. It makes you feel something when you kind of see those things, which a movie like this just kind of needs to make you feel the kills, or like feel the danger, feel the threat, and I think it achieves that, which is why I'm not surprised with how it's being received.
But I would have expected critics to really have a problem with this, right? Like I would expect them to say what I've been saying, which is, hey, what's the theme? What's the allegory? What's the subtext? Audiences tend to like movies like this, and critics tend to look for that kind of stuff. They want it to say something, and if a movie doesn't, it tends to tank the rating. And here it hasn't. Here it's still like 80% positive. It's almost like everybody has just conspired to say, you know what, you can have this one. Like this one is just an evil monkey or a sick monkey,
Yeah,
and it kills some people. Like it's a palate cleanser in between real movies.
I will say probably one of the better horrors that we get in January. To be fair, because January is notoriously not a great month for movies anyway. So of the ones that we've got in recent years, it does what it needs to do.
And that's kind of why I don't hate it. Like all the pieces are kind of like the thing that bothers me a little bit is about how where they seed ideas and then don't pay them off. But there's very little in here that's like unmotivated cliche. It's kind of obvious, but it's kind of like they kind of knew what to put into a monkey movie, and then they did it. My frustration is that they didn't take the next step, but they also didn't put in a bunch of like I think there might be one jump scare in this where Ben jumps out at somebody. There must have been one or two, but it doesn't rely on that, right? Like it doesn't. It's not cheap about it. It's actually fairly calm, and they let Ben just be menacing by himself, which is kind of interesting. They don't dig very deep in the horror movie cliche toolbox, which is what the bad horror movies that come out in January and February do. Even like Conjuring last year, it's just all very rote repetition of pieces you've seen before. It is not like this, right? There's very little generic stuff in this. That's kind of the difference between being obvious and being generic. If you want to see the difference between those two things, watch this movie.
Do you want to last thought it?
Yeah, so last thoughts for me is this is the okayest movie I've seen in a while. Nothing about it bothers me. Nothing about it is upsetting. Everything makes sense. I like the characters. I like Ben. I like the effects. A bunch of the kills are fine to good. It just stays at the obvious level. And I like it when a movie impresses me or surprises me, but in a way where I said, oh yeah, this took like a step further. And the closest this is when the guy's jaw gets pulled off very slowly and very agonizingly. But outside of that, there's not much where I say, oh yeah, you're going there. And so it is very much the most obvious, most predictable movie. On paper, it does everything right, but it's kind of missing the wow factor. So for that reason, that's a sure why not out of 5.
Yeah, I think I echo it. I think I'm maybe a little bit less positive than you are on it, but it's still fine. I think kind of the best way to describe it is it's fine. Like I saw it, it's inoffensive. It kind of did what it needed to do for the most part. And again, I always kind of go back to it gave a good cinema experience just because of everyone kind of like cringing at like the guy's jaws being ripped off or when the impact when the guy fell out of the pool and stuff like that. Like I just found it great that there was like such strong and loud reactions to that. It just kind of like elevated the movie in those elements a little bit more. But I know I kind of wish that there was like a little bit more going on, but at the same time, if there was, it probably wouldn't have been great. So they probably didn't bother with it or like cut it for specific reason, just because they just wanted to deliver on what they want to deliver, and you can't be mad at a movie for that. So I think overall, this will probably get like a 5 out of 10. This is just like kind of the middle of the road. It's like it's fine. It's neither great or no bad. So 5 out of 10.
All right, with that, shall we wrap it up?
And with that, I guess we reached the end of another episode. If you've reached this far, as always, we appreciate you pressing play. We appreciate you giving us a listen and checking us out. If you liked what you had today and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were chatting a bunch of nonsense, then boy, have I got some rabies for you. We are the Art of the Storm podcast.
Bye bye.
Ciao.